Alright, hello everybody, welcome back. Today is May the 9th, today I'm going to be talking about the ingress of Jupiter into Gemini, which will be happening on the 26th of May, so a couple weeks from now. Jupiter has been in Taurus, and Jupiter spends about, it's got a 12-year cycle, although with the retrogrades it kind of shakes things up a little bit so that it's not quite on the mark for exactly 1 year for each sign, but that's kind of an approximate idea that where you get the sense of how long it is for each sign. We're just separating from a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, so Uranus is going to hang around in Taurus for a bit more, and then eventually Uranus will also go into Gemini later on. But for now, we're just going to be getting Jupiter in Gemini on its own. And I have a specific take or an kind of contemplation that I have been doing about what this means. And it basically has a lot to do with Jupiter as, if you look at the Greek gods, Jupiter was the leader. It was the idea was that Kronos was previous the leader, and then Jupiter basically usurped Kronos to be the head kind of patriarch that brought kind of order and a sense of cohesion to the universe. And however, Gemini is a Mercury-ruled sign where Jupiter is in its exile or detriment. And I often think there's something, when I think about Jupiter and Gemini, one of the things that I have, the image that comes to me is like the disco ball, right? Where you've got a whole bunch of people partying, dancing around, and the room is lit by a singular light source that hovers above in a, that's vertically separated and hovering above and casting a reflected light that spins around in a kind of hypnotic way, right? And so that there is this sort of singular thing, but it is divided and reflected and cast in all directions, and it's moving. And this kind of creates a sort of, and I mean, also keep in mind that while we're going to be having eventually Saturn and Neptune ingress into Aries, but Jupiter in Gemini will be playing into this because Pisces is a Jupiter-ruled sign, so Jupiter is its domicile ruler, and it will be making an aspect to it from another mutable sign, which means a square aspect, right? And so there's something about the sort of Saturn and Neptune, I've also mentioned, has a strong association with communism, right? And that there's a lot of sort of economic upheaval and stuff like that. So one of the things to watch out for, I suppose, is the certain thing about, political extremism or writing like manifestos or stuff like that, like the Communist Manifesto. Well, we're not going to get into that, but the Russian Revolution happened under a Saturn-Neptune Conjunction, right? So there is this sort of like, not just the Uranus being revolutionary, but there being, I was talking in my last video how Pluto had this strong association with fascism, because after Pluto was discovered, Hitler rose to power. And I think you could also similarly associate, like you could balance that out by saying if Pluto's the fascist planet, then Neptune is the communist planet, basically, right? And because now using this idea, just keeping that in mind of the potential communist danger that's there with Jupiter and Gemini because of the Saturn-Neptune Pisces influence. I've been reading some books recently that I've decided that I have a certain, there's a certain style of literature that I go for, and that I'm not going to be incorporating all the books that I read into my astrology channel. And Jupiter, however, is like a teacher, right? Jupiter Sagittarius is primarily associated with like the philosopher, and the thing is that even if you don't agree with a certain philosophy, you still have to kind of deal with the multiplicity of different attitudes and beliefs and perspectives out there, right? And when I would have to say that I did make a few videos in the past about like joking around about Delusian astrology, and I am basically made this resolution that if I'm going to be making astrology videos, that I'm not going to be trying to like invent some kind of a new brand, label called Delusian astrology. I'm just an astrologer that likes to read Deleuze, and if the Deleuze and Guattari and stuff like that I'm reading is at all relevant to my astrology, then that's great, because it gives me some inspiration that maybe people who aren't reading this stuff don't have, right? But I'm not making a new type of astrology that's influenced by that kind of philosophy. And I'm still working my way through 1,000 Plateaus right now. But in the midst of reading 1,000 Plateaus, I decided to start reading this book called Dividuum, Machinic Capitalism and Molecular Revolution. And there's certain things about, like, again, that I think in some respects people may be a bit confused about, like, if I'm really into astrology. And I was also talking about Christian Neoplatonism in my last video, that they might see it as a bit of a conflict, as like a lot of people have these certain there's certain ideological reservations where that Christian Neoplatonism is a kind of essentialism, and that whatever Deleuze and Guattari are doing are specifically not like anti-essentialist. So that these two things are kind of like oil and water, that they don't mix together, and that they should be separated. And you shouldn't try to combine them or make a kind of a hybrid product to sell to people, right? So that's, just to clarify, that's not what I'm doing, right? However, I did really enjoy this book, but it's like, this is written in a style that's heavily influenced by Deleuze and Guattari. I find it probably easier to read, though, but if you haven't read any Deleuze and Guattari, it may not make any sense. But there's something, I just finished this around the time that we're leading into this, I was reading this right as this Jupiter-Uranus conjunction perfected, and now we're heading into this Jupiter into Gemini, and there's something about the message of that book. Although I have to say the different chapters go off in all sorts of different directions, so I'm not going to just like give you a summary about what it's about, but there's something about this issue about what it's like to make content online, and my own diverse range of interests. It reminds me, let's just, where do you start with this? Like, for example, I have been taking a break from social media. I did kind of just give in and post some stuff on Facebook yesterday, but I've been trying to just focus on doing YouTube videos. And YouTube works in such a way that, like, I make electronic music, I make astrology videos, I have another blog that I was basically it was kind of like a cultural commentary thing, more or less, where I was talking about stuff like, I did a video about Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep that got fairly popular on that channel. And I've talked about different songs from bands I like and interpreting them and stuff like that. But the whole thing is that when you're doing like I can see that my astrology channel gets has more subscribers, more of a bigger audience, more numbers basically than any of these other channels. And that the whole thing is that if you, like, I like making electronic music. I don't know if it's really viable or possible to be a successful electronic musician or something. But if I'm just going off of YouTube, it is usually kind of discouraging in terms of, like, you're making stuff and putting it out there, and you're like, well, it looks like when I make astrology stuff, that does a lot better than when I do, when I make electronic music and I try to put that out there, right? Or and it starts to create this psychological thing where you're like, so I'm a multifaceted person that does a lot of different stuff, but there's one of these things is more viable if I'm going to make a successful channel than others. And so there's a lot of pressure to basically eliminate or move all this different stuff, or also just to like the idea that you have to like present. I have to present, if I'm going to make astrology videos, I have to present a version of myself that where I remove everything from myself that doesn't fit with the what would be a successful astrology video, right? And one of the examples is that I noticed that like if I make astrology videos where if I try to not get into any philosophy, not get into any theory, not getting into talking too much about pop culture, movies, I just try to talk about like make a video talking about the age of Aquarius or something. That's going to get a lot more views because I'm really focusing in on just doing this one thing and I'm removing, but like the truth is that a person isn't just one single thing, that they're a whole mix of different influences, right? And this is kind of what this is one of the things that they talk about in this book, right? And there's this kind of thing that like, you know, as soon as I start talking about Deleuze and Guattari, there might be actually, there's one guy who found me because he was looking for a Deleuzian astrology, right? So there are some people who are interested in that. But the more I talk about things that aren't astrology in my astrology videos, it's like I'm polluting them or I'm contaminating them or I'm, you know, getting all mixed up in things that don't go together, right? And this reminds me of, you know, like I had this friend, just to give a bit, I don't know if it matters about the, whatever, I'll just mention that I got, when it comes to electronic music, I bought a lot of my modular synthesizers, or I got started anyways, of a friend that was giving up on Eurorack modular, and he said he was just done with that format. He was going to sell me his stuff or whatever. And there's something about like, I always have this sort of tendency where I want to like try to like combine things that don't really go together. And gave me this anecdote, like just not to do that. Because he was talking about, like, he went to he tried to, like, do a kind of a synthesizer noise performance at, some kind of an open mic or some kind of, like, a folk music thing. And it's like, when you take people that are really into, like, acoustic guitar and folk music, and then you start just blasting weird modular synth noise at them, of course they're not going to take it very well. But for some, I don't know what was in this guy's mind, like, why that would be even a good idea in the first place. But he was basically thought it went so bad for him, or he just offended people so much that it was just like, he was just traumatized, and I think that probably motivated him to sell all his modular synthesizer stuff, and just like the idea that you may be a kind of person that it's not that you just only like acoustic guitar and you only like folk music, but if you're making a product to offer to people, that you have to just be like, I'm going to take out all this other weird shit and just give you this one product, because the demographics will be like, for people who like folk stuff, it'll be easy for them to like this, and they don't have to like deal with all this other shit in the background that messes it up, kind of thing, right? But at the same time, it ends up turning, it also kind of reminds me of like the way we do things with like stereotyping people, when you try to like categorize people in your head as like punk rockers or goths or hippies or like jocks, or you end up having this very like Breakfast Club kind of thing, right? And like there's some people that like you may associate with these different labels, but if you were actually asked that person how they think of themselves, they might see themselves as being much more multifaceted than that, right? That they don't see themselves as just fitting into some narrow demographic category, and by thinking about somebody as just like, this person is just like this person is just like that, this is just a like, or like, those like memes like Wojak kind of like people, there's this kind of thing of like people don't want to be reduced down into just like a caricature or a meme or a stereotype, and that there's like the idea that you are also like there's this thing like IFS, internal family systems therapy, that rather than thinking of yourself as just a singular entity, that you could be a person with all sorts of multiple parts, right? But based on like how you're dressed or how you're presenting yourself or your involvement with one. Like, there's this sort of pressure basically to find whatever part of your personality is that is the most profitable, and then try to eliminate, or basically, or it could just be mask or hide all these other parts that don't go with it, so you can just present this one thing to people that will be an easy pill for them to swallow, and they will be eagerly open their wallets and give you money, because they don't have to be like, well, I'd like this more if it wasn't mixed in with all this other shit that I don't understand or I don't like, or, right? So, like, there's this kind of I've been thinking about, like, the kind of books that I like to read, the philosophy I like to do, and there's this pressure that I could, like, I could just make astrology videos and try to be very focused in on just talking about the astrology and not get into all this philosophy, and then I could, like, take my philosophy or whatever, this other stuff that I like, and separate it from astrology, and then make it into some sort of product that people would like and people would consume and pay money for, that if they didn't like astrology, if they didn't believe in astrology, or if they were the kind of people that thought that, because Deleuze and Guattari were categorically anti-essentialist, and that astrology is categorically pro-essentialist, that there's a certain cognitive dissonance that happens when you put those two together, and that by presenting a certain thing that appeals to the anti-essentialist attitude, and avoiding any sort of cognitive dissonance, right? That you can just give something that you don't have to stress out about contradictions or logical clashes or problematics. You can just be like, oh, well, this is, I don't even have to think about it. I already know what this means. It's just an easy pill to swallow, and I can just pay this guy to keep feeding the same. I already know what the pill is like. I can just keep getting fed the same pill over and over and over again, right? But what I find it more interesting to inhabit those kinds of points of tension and antagonisms and conflicts, and then see what kind of weird sparks fly out of those riffs, right? Rather than just making an easy product that basically probably somebody else is probably already doing a better job at giving you that straight thing that's uncontaminated, not mixed up. And, like, there's something about Jupiter and Gemini which I think is going to be really interesting, because I think there's an opportunity to embrace the side of things that are mixtures, that are multiplicities, that are a collection of different parts, that if you look at them all together rather than just singling one out and offering it up as a product, there may be weird sort of tensions or antagonisms or contradictions, but there's a way that, unfortunately, Jupiter kind of gets frustrated by that, because Jupiter wants to be have this one singular kind of light that governs over things. But it's really, like, he's one of 7 planets. He's the patriarch of a multiplicity. And one of the interesting things about Hellenistic astrology, or the attitude of a Hellenistic polytheism in the first place, is that it's not a monotheism. We are dealing with a cast of characters, the Greek gods, the multiplicities, and, like Carl Jung said, the gods have become diseases, because we can't see the multiplicities, we can't deal with the antagonisms and the tensions between multiple forces, that we believe in a singular truth, and that the tension, that we can only address the tensions of multiplicities and these different dynamics through our own illness and being sick and are maladjusted and all this kind of stuff, right? Oh man. Now where am I going with this? Do I have... There's something interesting about this book, that where I'm talking about what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the idea of, rather than embracing the multiplicity, trying to create these products that work on social media, that work on YouTube, that appeal to very specific kind of demographics, that create these stereotypes, that create these labels, create these containers that are basically limiting boxes that you have to fit yourself into, and basically forcibly remove all these other parts that make you a dynamic, interesting, flexible person. and single yourself into this sort of character that's like a cartoon that's kind of detached from the actual reality of life, that's kind of messy and chaotic, to an overly simplified thing that is comforting because simple things are easier to understand, right? But there's something, what's interesting about this book is that in a different chapter, this guy talks about this book came out in, I think, 2016, so it's like, it's 8 years old now, and a lot of stuff has happened since then. It came out right before the whole Donald Trump era started and all this, so that I don't know if maybe the author his perspective has changed or evolved or developed now, but there is one of the things he talks about is what led to the 2008 stock market crash, or I guess it could be 2007 or whatever, this thing about the derivatives in the stock market crash, right? And the idea is that the banking was being done at trading these things which were called derivatives, right? Where you had a whole bunch of different kinds of stocks that were bundled together. And the idea is that you had good stocks mixed up with bad stocks, right? And that this idea that, like, rather than that, the way that capitalism actually works is not by not by purifying things into, like, if you're putting your money on it's like, also, I don't know, I have investing in mutual funds, and they're a bit like this, the idea of diversifying your bonds, right? That instead of having all your eggs in one basket, or having, like, you're putting all your money on this one singular thing that either does well or not does well, that you have a diverse stock portfolio. And that, but the thing that was funny is that the derivatives got in trouble because there were some stocks that were really, really bad, that really had no value, that were really trouble, and they were being offset by being mixed in with other stocks that were much more reliable. And so there's this kind of, and they were kind of like glossing over that and like selling it in a way that hid the problems. Although, this could be a greater simplification, right? Because the guy also talks about how there's this kind of thing about how there's a certain moralism that was put on the people that were, that people were being granted subprime mortgages, right? Where the banks were giving a whole bunch of money to people who were not in a very good financial position to pay it back. And then those, the loans that those people had, or the debt that those people had, was being folded into a derivative that, you weren't saying that, that we have this derivative that is basically where you're buying the debt of a whole bunch of people that are poor and probably not going to be able to pay this debt off, and we're gonna fold that into a bunch of other stuff and then and hide it and camouflage it and mask it and give it to you as this thing, and we're going to suggest that it's better than it is, right? There was a kind of moralism that judged the people that were getting these good loans in an unfair way. It was their fault because they weren't hard workers, that they were just taking advantage of a messed up system, right? But he also makes this argument in that book that there was like they ended up bailing out the big banks, right? And they ended up putting basically the working class on the hook for it, and opening up a period of economic austerity very much like the one we're in now. And it's sort of like, there's this kind of thing going on that I've noticed, that like when I was looking up there's this, like, going back to this idea of camouflaging, right? Like, if you are you're having these stock derivatives that are like, you have some stuff that's really probably not very good mixed in with stuff that's like average and good, and you have a big kind of like salad where you're like everything's mixed in together. It's like similar, like I have to admit that, like, with healthy eating habits and unhealthy eating habits and stuff like that, to give another example, is that one of the things I like to eat is kimchi, right? Because kimchi has got probiotics, and it's fermented food, and it's like, kimchi has all these health benefits or whatever. And I often will just make ramen soup of these, like, it has a lot of palm oil in it, has a lot of artificial flavors in the soup packet, but I will make ramen soup, and I will add in a couple of fried eggs and kimchi, and like enhance, but it's sort of like, you end up this thing where you've got like some healthy food mixed in with stuff that's probably not healthy, and it's like, there is this kind of thing that I've noticed that they can create a problem where, like, when the aforementioned stereotype of hippies, right? Like, sorry for getting stereotypical. They're one of the things why hippies have a bad name is that you could, like, there's a guy that I was living with before I moved back to my family's house, and it's like the idea of, like, you can glamorize certain things like herbalism, or like foraging for medicinal mushrooms or whatever, right? And you could be like, you could be talking about how, like, the government and industry and big pharma just sells a bunch of, like, toxic shit that's going to poison you, and you need to get back to nature and collect all these, like, these organic herbal things that are pure because they're from Mother Earth, right? And that you're avoiding the contamination. But the thing, like, if you actually look at in this case, if you're like an alcoholic, and also no judgment here, right? Because I don't want to, there's certain things that people, sometimes I think there people have been through, I'm not going to try to judge or justify addiction or alcoholism, but I'm just saying the fact of the matter is that if you are an addict, or you are addicted to things like alcohol, hard drugs, smoking cigarettes, or you're a free spirit that likes to party, it's like there is this thing where, like, instead of just mixing all these habits that are unhealthy and just throwing some, like, foraged mushrooms into the mix, or like trying to get some, like, like, it's okay that I'm basically wasted like 7 days a week, and I'm like just chain smoking. If I just, like, take a few, like, red rishis and add that to it's kind of like it will like make it all better, man. Like, it's like you might actually, in that situation, you may be better off just removing the things that are making you sick, rather than trying to, like, add a bunch of, like, herbs and then just be like, well, I like to get wasted, but when I do get wasted, I wander through the forest and I pick mushrooms and eat them, and that makes it better, right? Like, it's like there's something about this where it may be kind of like, it may not really be helpful, and sometimes in some instances it may help to actually sort of remove the thing that's problematic, rather than just dumping more things in. Right? So, I don't know. Where am I going with this? Did I just get completely lost off track? There's the whole thing about, nonetheless, the way capitalism works is that capitalism works in such a way that if the stock market goes up or goes down, we have a globalized system, meaning that everything is connected to everything else. And if you have money in a mutual fund or money in the stock market, you can invest in all sorts of things, but the tendency is that either everything is doing well or everything is doing poorly, and it doesn't really matter, you can have this idea that you're just going to separate yourself from all the things that are, although this is what I was getting at. This whole mixed in thing, right? Is that there could be, like, people that, there's this kind of attitude that capitalism has opened up a classless society, right? Because there is no hard division anymore between the working class, the proletariat, and the wealthy elite, right? And so but if you look at what happened at the 2008 stock market crash, there was a very clear division, because the people that work for the huge banks, that when the banks crashed, the banks weren't on the hook for it. They just got bailed out, right? And so the people that actually had to pick up the slack were the working class. And they're saying it's kind of like this, kind of like the ones who got into power first, right? The ones who already established wealth and power and influence and some sort of positioned in some sort of kind of hierarchical position, like they're not on the hook for it. Right? They're like, if everything goes to shit, they get bailed out, and it's the poor people who have to pay the problem, right? And this is the same way that there's, like, if you look at the whole yellow vests thing or whatever in France, like, we're obviously, if climate change, all the different crises happen, like climate change, the global crisis that affects everybody, you can have we're going to have, like, the people are upset about things like carbon taxes, because if you're poor and you are disproportionately affected by a carbon tax in a way that some rich wealthy person isn't, then it's sort of like you have an unbalanced system where for a certain class of people, they're not getting impacted very much from this, whereas there are certain people that are really going to be feeling the pinch, or they're really going to be feeling the pressure, right? But we live in we create this picture where you're like, well, that's just your own fault because you invested in the wrong thing, and and I'm part of a family that we were just superior. We're superior white people who had all the good ideas, and we get to profit because we're better, and you don't get to profit because you're worse, right? And like they're creating this sort of system of inequality, right? And so like the idea that like if people the capitalism is like a level playing field where everybody has the same access to this thing, but there's like it's not really, the idea is like, it's not really like everything's leveled out. It's that there's like these inequalities that are all put together into the same package, where that happens in such a way that like if we're all affected by what happens on a global level, right? Where if I'm just living my life, going about my business, and the Israelis and the Palestinians decide to start killing each other, then everything's fucked. I don't have anything to do with that, but my life, like, I have to freak out and be stressed. I have to have a panic attack because Iran and Iran and Israel are shooting drones and missiles at each other. I'm on the fucking other side of the world. I don't give a shit about this, but I have to be like, I have to have a panic attack about something that, what am I going to do? I'm going to go out and protest. Can you people that play on the other side of the world, please stop killing each other, because it hurts my feelings. Do you think they're going to listen to me? No, that's why I'm not going to bother with any of that shit, right? But we all buy into the system where if one problem happens, everybody's fucked, and it's like everyone's like, oh, the sky is falling, it's the end of the world, because we are all basically bought into the system where it's all just put together. And so the way capitalism actually works is, it's not that you have some pure individualized thing. It's like we're all fucked because we're all in this together, and but there are these certain inequalities where the rich people, there's this trend basically that I noticed when I was doing some research into different fashion trends, called stealth wealth, right? Which is that people, rather than having these brand names and these things that are very like instantly recognizable, it's like the difference between wearing, like, one person could be wearing a suit that costs like $60 or something, a really cheap suit that they got at the mall, and then somebody could be wearing a suit that's worth like thousands and thousands of dollars, and like you have to like look at it with like a magnifying glass to look, but they're not going to have any big flashy labels. It's like, if you know how to recognize what wealth looks like, you can be like, that guy is wearing clothes that are worth more than my car, right? Where then you could also spot somebody else who's wearing the poor man's version of that, which tries to imitate that look, but you can tell that this guy doesn't have any money, right? But it's like, so the people that are in the know can tell who actually has wealth and power and who doesn't, but they're trying to create this idea that, like, if you without looking into the details, it looks like we're all just on the same playing field, right? That we're all just on the same, we're all equals, we're all working class, and it's just like the rich people, they just work harder than you. They just put more work into making decisions about what's going to be successful for them and not. And you're just, because you're just not good at making those decisions, it's like meritocracy, right? That's why you're poor, right? But it's like the fact is that we're all interconnected into this thing, but it's like the people who profit are one person is in a position that profits if things go well, and then if things don't go well, the other person is the person who has to take the problem, right? Like, if everything gets fucked up, I'm in a position where I'm insulated from that, and I can just lay back, where other people get to be really frustrated and angry and feel like their world's falling apart, where if you're rich and powerful, you can just chill on it, right? And so there are these inequalities, but I don't know, like, this is kind of the problem with Jupiter in Gemini, is that things are like simultaneously divided and you've got all these inequalities, but at the same time you've got this pretense that we're all just playing the same game, right? Like, it doesn't matter, like, if you're on Twitter or something like that, it doesn't. You can be the owner of Twitter, or you can just be some person who's never posted a tweet before, but you can at that person, and we have this level. We have this sort of smooth playing field where we're all equals, and if you can't win in that system, that's your fault, right? Right? So. And there's also an opportunity, I think, to address some of the problems here, because, like I said, the Russian Revolution happened under Saturn-Neptune Conjunction, right? And so we've got that dynamic going in here as well. But unfortunately, I don't think communism is going to go over very well on an astrology channel. So it would be better for me if I'm making astrology videos to basically select everything that goes in the direction of a communist political ideology, and then just selectively remove that and edit it out, so I can focus telling you about like Vedius Valens and Guido Bonatti and all that, and then give you the product that you want, so I can be successful in this system, and that I can appeal to the kind of people who have a narrow-minded view of what astrology videos are supposed to be like, right? And but my idea is like the same way as the derivatives have a bunch of things mixed together, that I'm specifically not going to do that. My plan, I'm just laying it out for you, what my plan is that I'm not going to create another channel where I talk about like neo-Marxist postmodern political theory and like anarchist action. I'm not going to do that at all, because based on the way the numbers are, it makes a lot more sense just to stick to doing astrology videos and doing my best to just present to you unadulterated, just pure, straight up astrology content. But I'm still going to be probably reading a lot of books like this that maybe I'll like take them out and I'll wave them in front of the camera. Maybe I won't, but it's going to be influencing my perspective on things and how I approach making astrology videos. And you're just going to have to deal with it, basically, right? But the thing is, maybe my astrology channel won't do very well because of that. And maybe there'll be a lot of pressure on me to stop reading certain books, to stop entertaining certain lines of thought, and basically just try to imitate the people who are successful, right? And try to do a better job at doing something that somebody's already set themselves, we're all in a global system, so you're probably going to have a few people that do this one thing really well, and that anybody else who wants to have any popularity, they're not competing. You're not competing with the people like the local astrologers in your town or your city. You're competing with the whole world, right? So this is the same way that it's like, like on there's this weird smoothed out playing field where you're either number one or you're zero. You're like Talladega Nights. You're either first or you're last, right? And in order to get in the first place, you got to chop off all the dead weight. You got to remove all this stuff that isn't going to fly, because people don't want to hear about neo-Marxist communists and their astrology videos. They want to keep it to Neoplatonic perfect ideals, these alchemical forms that have been purified. We've removed all the contamination, so we can just give you the pure product of, like, it's like cocaine, basically, right? We're going to give you this like shot of just like astrology cocaine that's been removed of any impurities, and it's going to be super addictive, right? Because it's giving you just what you want and none of what you don't want. So you're just going to keep coming back for that hit of just like the pure shit that you like, but then you're going to be like, oh no, there's actually communism mixed up in it, and then you're going to be like then this is but I'm not communist, though, right? And my ancestors were white Russians who basically fled the communists, and it would be basically like a disrespect to my ancestors if I was to try to indulge in communist propaganda in my astrology videos. So I can assure you that that's not what I'm doing. Even though I do like Deleuze and Guattari, and Felix Guattari was a card-carrying member of the Communist Party, but I don't think that political ideology really has any weight in the current political climate. And I think the promising thing about the Saturn-Neptune conjunction isn't to create a new communist manifesto, because we already, but to come up with some new way of doing things, that we're not just repeating, regurgitating some old idea, that you have to go to university to learn. You have to sign up to learn how all the ideas don't. There isn't any option. All we have to do is just submit ourselves to this sort of kind of neoliberal technocracy that basically, if you can get your YouTube numbers to go up, you're doing the right thing. If you can't get them to go up, you have to figure out a way to change and adapt yourself to this system. Right? Because that's what Jordan Peterson says, right? He says that if you are a comedian, you just have to pay attention to what makes people laugh, right? And if your jokes aren't making people laugh, you just got to figure out a different joke, right? So you just got to figure out, you got to remove all the things that aren't making your product into this sort of totally addictive form of internet cocaine that everybody's going to get addicted to, right? And then so that is the this is basically my approach for Jupiter and Gemini. I hope you like it. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and there will be more purified astrology cocaine on the way for you to get hooked on, and you're gonna love it so much. You're just gonna be like, do you have any more? And you're gonna want to basically open the Jupiter in you're gonna be going through such a time of prosperity and abundance. You're gonna have so much money, and you're just gonna want more of this sort of purified astrology cocaine product that I'm manufacturing, that you're gonna start demanding that I must have something that I'm not putting out online, so that there may be a paywall that you're just going to shell out all this money for whatever's behind my paywall, because my product is you're just so hooked on it, right? Because it's really just going to give you exactly what you're looking for and have none of this bullshit that you don't like in your astrology videos, right? And you are just going to be no other astrologer is going to be able to do this for you, right? Because what I'm doing is going to be a product that nobody else can deliver. And you're going to love it. So it's going to be a great time. Thanks for watching. Okay, thanks.